and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode. I got to talk to Terrence Hanou. He was a cop for 21 years, but had to medically retire in 2019. Today, he's the owner of Blue Line Roasting. It's a coffee company he started in 2018, but not just to provide a quality coffee product. He also had the intention of supporting law enforcement and honoring fallen officers. During our conversation, we talked everything coffee, obviously. But he also talked about his secret battle and treatment for his own PTSD, but then finding his passion in his coffee company and being able to give back to the law enforcement community through the sale of his coffee. Episode 9 with Terrence Hanou. This is the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantani, and I've been a police officer for 30 years. I'll be having interesting conversations with guests who are former first responders, military, or both, and who will explain their experiences with their transition. I cannot say this enough. Prepare today for your transition tomorrow. Regardless of the why, you're closing in on your retirement, you just want to do something different, or other circumstances have or are forcing your transition. I believe this podcast will be beneficial to you. Thank you for taking the time to listen. Let's get into this. Now that you've started a coffee company, did it make you a coffee snob?
Yeah.
Can you not
Can't
go get a cup of coffee at 7-Eleven?
Not at Starbucks anymore.
Not even at Starbucks?
No. Can't do it.
Well,
I just wanted a trip to Tennessee, and I brought my own coffee with me.
And you have to grind it every time and do all that?
Yep.
Do you do the pour over?
Oh, pour over. Yeah, the AeroPresses, everything. When you taste fresh coffee, it's day and night difference. It is.
So I haven't gone that deep into the rabbit hole yet because I'm actually afraid that I'll get to a point where I don't really like Starbucks coffee, but I drink black coffee. And so
I like this then.
Just being able to go into just any place and just give me a black cup of coffee.
Yeah.
And for the most part, I'm sure I'll equate it to I enjoy drinking wine.
Yeah.
There are wines that are very nice to drink. There are wines that aren't very nice to drink. Yeah. But going down that path with the coffee thing kind of makes me like, well, now what am I going to do? I'm going to go to a restaurant and I can't even order a cup of coffee?
You'll drink it. I mean, if you have to. But I mean, generally speaking, in the morning, you're going to want what you want, whether it's a pour over, an AeroPress, or just, in a Keurig if that's the case. But you'll do it differently.
Now, what's the difference between an AeroPress and a pour over?
AeroPress, you're actually pushing the coffee through a filter at a greater pressure, I guess. If not, the pour over is just by gravity alone. And different grinds, you can do different things, and there's a whole world out there.
And I would imagine for everybody, they have their own preferences for how they want to do it. There's not one quote unquote right way to do it.
No, it used to be you think about it, you go to a hotel room and you get just that little Mr. Coffee pot or whatever, and you just pour over and you drink whatever coffee comes out of it. But things just like craft beer, craft wines, everything has changed over the years, and coffee is just the next big thing. So people like their coffee. Everybody drinks coffee just about.
So what's your magic recipe for how you make your coffee?
I use it's called. There's two different methods of it's done. There's called a drum roaster, which is the old traditional. You see those big giant machines in there, and they'll batch up anywhere from 100 pounds on up. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. Usually it's propane, so it's heat. The beans are churned in there. There's an actual skin that comes off the coffee bean itself, and it's called chaff. That gets burned back into it. So back in the 70s, there's some guy named Sivitz, I think his name is. It's called a fluid bed air roaster, hot air fluid bed roaster. It's basically like a popcorn machine. It's hot air turns into a bowl, and you have your temperature probes, and all the chaff that comes off it gets sucked up through a vent, so it doesn't get burned back into it. That's where you get the bitterness and the acidity in coffee, because that chaff gets burned back into the coffee. If you look at Starbucks, they burn all their coffee. They're known for that. That's what they call it, charbucks.
They do it because it just saves time, or
because it's an old tradition, and you can buy these massive machines that can roast hundreds of pounds at a time. The machine I have only 10 pounds for the average roast is anywhere from 9 minutes to about 12 minutes, give or take. So, but mine, it's only 10 pounds per roast. So it's a smaller batch. You can buy a bigger machine. I think the biggest one they make is about 50 pounds. So you're constantly roasting when you can do it in these big giant drums and just be a mass seller.
So obviously we're talking about your company, Blue Line
Roasting.
Blue Line Roasting. And how long you been in business?
This is 2018.
2018. And how many? You've got different lines here. How many different or would it be called a line of coffee?
Just different blends. We have 6 actually. I only brought 5 because the other one is what I call our justified blend. That's a decaf. Nobody drinks decaf. Why would you?
What if you just like the taste of coffee and you don't want the caffeine?
There is that. And there's people with heart troubles that actually do.
Because
decaf.
I have actually just drank decaffeinated coffee for the mere fact of, like I said, I like a cup of black coffee. I just like the taste of it. I don't need the caffeine. I'm not one of those people who wakes up in the morning and goes, oh, I need a cup of coffee because I need to get going. I just want the flavor.
I need at least 1 cup in the morning. If not, I'm non-functional. Forget about me for the day. But no, those are the 5 blends that we have, and each one is different. Some are mixed with Brazilian beans, Guatemalans, Sumatra, Peruvian beans. I have my own little secret recipe, and all of them are.
Give a rundown on the different lines that you have.
Well, they're basically there's a light, medium, and dark, and then we have 2 other darker ones, which is I can't see from on this end of it. Our Firmissile is our espresso. It's just one of our darkest. If you like a really dark roast, that's the way you want to go.
Does it need to be made in an espresso?
No.
Okay.
No. It's actually that one works out pretty good, like in just a basic drip situation. But any bean, any blend you have, you can always do. You can grind it differently. Like for instance, if you had a French press, you're familiar with those. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like what an AeroPress is, but it's different. But your grind's going to be very coarse because you want the beans, actually the grounds, to be soaked in there for about 4 to 5 minutes, and then you press it through. More water that hits the bean, the more the taste that you're going to get. So sometimes you may want to soak it in there because it's going to bring out those flavors differently than you would if it was extremely fine, putting it through a filter. So again, you can hack this thing up any way you want it. It's all about preference, just like anything else, Do
you find that when you're playing around with it, will you mix your blends?
I have in the past. Each one of these have anywhere from 3 to 5 different beans in each bag, and it's blended based on percentages. So it's kind of a little hard to explain, but there's a system to everything. And there's also,
You can just be honest. You started a coffee company so you could travel the world and write it off.
I'll tell you how I started it, to be honest with you. So, back in 2018, when I was IOD, I was watching the owner from Black Rifle, Hoff, I forgot his first name. And he was on Fox News. And he was talking about,
Evan Haffer?
Yes, that guy. He's incredible. So he's a vet, and this is during the Obama administration where they were bringing in like 10,000 Syrians, and Starbucks was going to hire them all. And he's like, that's BS. Why don't you hire vets? So he started, his Black Rifle coffee, and I thought, God, that's a good cause. I wonder if cops do the same thing. Google it real quick. There wasn't very many at all. And they seemed like they were kind of rinky-dink companies that were just doing it, out of their bedroom kind of thing, out of their kitchen. And I thought, you know what? I can do this. This can't be that hard, right? And I figured I want to help somebody. I love coffee anyways. So I got a guy that built my website, got a graphics designer guy. He designed my first bags. These are my newest ones. I just got these probably about 2 months ago. These were my design. And I went to Klatch Coffee. So there's a thing called rebranding. I'm sure a lot of people are aware of. Or it's also called toll roasting. So you can buy beans, give them to a roaster, and you tell them exactly, hey, this is exactly what I want done, and they'll roast it for you, and they charge you a tremendous amount of money to do that. So I actually ended up using Klatch's coffee, and it was basically rebranding. And then I was selling coffee left and right. It was great. I was doing fundraisers for cops across the United States and what have you. And then I thought, God, well, my company name is Blue Line Roasting. So shouldn't I be roasting like this? I almost felt like it was fraudulent, but everybody else does this. This is a normal thing to do. And believe it or not, I roast a ton of coffee for other companies, and they rebrand
as their brand.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a totally normal thing to do. But I just didn't feel good about it. I figured I want to keep up to my name and stuff. So I bought this little 3-pound hot air roaster, and I don't know, about 1,000 pounds later, I finally figured out how to do it. I was burning stuff left and right. Everything was on fire in my garage. I started off in my garage. And it just went from there. And then people were like, hey, this is really good coffee. All my neighbors were tweaked out because I'm giving out stuff. All my friends were like, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? They're like, dude, this is like phenomenal. And I'm like, okay, I'm doing something right. So I went from there. And then I I did a fundraiser for, I'm not sure if you remember back in 2016, there was actually it was 6 Baton Rouge deputies were shot. 3 were killed, I think.
Yes.
One was injured, Nick Tillier. He was the one who shot in the head, the gut, and the arm. The other 2 were, I think, somewhat superficial, and they survived it. I contacted the family because I read a story. I'm like, this he's messed up for life. And you see him, he's never, ever going to have a regular life. And it just, to me, the story kind of hit me hard. So I called the family. I said, hey, look, we'd like to do a fundraiser for you guys and get some money, get him a different bed if he needs a bed or a better wheelchair. I don't care what it is. They have the most incredible support there in Baton Rouge. It's unbelievable. We sold, it was around $12,000 in coffee in one day.
Wow.
So I was able to send them a check. The way I do things is 50% of the proceeds go right towards whatever their cause is. So I was able to give him a check for I think $5,000 or $6,000, and he bought whatever he needed for his medical needs. And that for me was very empowering. But this little tiny machine, it took me forever. 3 pounds every 9 to 12 minutes, depending on what it is. And I'm like, that's it. So I went and I invested $15,000 in a new machine that does the 10 pounds every 10 minutes or so. And now I can just batch. I mean, I can batch hundreds of pounds in one day and keep up with the rest of them. So, yeah.
So obviously your coffee line is Blue Line Roasting, leaning towards the law enforcement. How long were you in law enforcement?
21 years. 98 to 19.
Do you come from a line of law enforcement in your family?
First.
You're the first one?
First generation, yeah.
Where'd you grow up?
City of La Cañada.
So Southern California?
Yeah.
Born and raised?
Yep.
And what took you to when did you know you wanted to go into law enforcement?
I think since I was a kid. Ever since I was a kid, we played cops and robbers back then in the 70s and the early 80s and stuff. And I'll admit, I got chased around by deputies quite a bit as a kid. This is the 70s. It is what it is. I actually got my first unlicensed ticket at 10 years old by a deputy.
What were you riding? Or
dirt
driving?
Dirt bike. Yeah, he got me. Took the bike. I go to court and the judge laughed. He's like, "What are you doing here?" I don't know, Your Honor. Like, my mom's sitting right here, kind of thing. But I always had respect for them. I just figured it was a job where you can actually truly help somebody, opposed to pushing numbers or sitting behind a desk somewhere doing something like that. And I like the outdoors too, something different.
So through high school, you were targeted. That's what you were going to do as law enforcement.
Yeah, yeah.
What years again?
98 to 2019.
But so you ended up getting injured, correct?
Yeah.
Give me a little bit of.
It was, so it's just really 2 phases to it. Back in 2017, I was watching when it was Texas. I think it was 5 deputies were killed. I'm not sure if you remember it. And there was those 2 giant cement markers, and the bad guy had an AR. He was kind of baited out one of the other officers. The officer went around. The guy came up behind him and lit him up from behind and killed him. And I remember watching that going, it was in June or July of 2016. And it just made me sick to my stomach. I'm like, and I've seen a lot of cop videos I've seen cops getting killed too. But seeing that one, for whatever reason, triggered me. And I was on duty that day, went to some cheesy call, and I got sick in the stomach. I'm like, God, I don't really feel so good right now. And I could feel it rushing from my stomach up. And I'm like, my partner's looking at me. He's like, dude, are you okay? I'm like, I don't know, man. I go, I think I'm about to have a heart attack. And it ran through me like a freight train, right through my chest, out the top of my head. And my partner goes, dude, I'm rolling fire. I'm like, don't call anybody yet, because whatever it is just blew out the top of my head, kind of thing. And I'm like, I'm not right, but I just need to go to the station, take a breather. So I went to the station, took off all my gear, and I couldn't breathe. For the life of me, I could not breathe. So what I figured out many months later, it was a massive panic attack. But I did not understand it. But we're cops. We don't go to the fire department. Hey, man, can you check me out? What's going on with me, kind of thing. So
how was it ultimately diagnosed as a panic attack?
Months later through therapy. Okay. So, and I'll get to that part of it. But so for months, it got worse and worse and worse. But that one massive one was later to be possibly an actual heart attack, because I found out later on my heart was damaged. So
did the panic attack damage the heart, or was the heart already damaged?
I think it was a heart attack, / panic attack. And I think they kind of coupled together somehow.
Okay.
But months went by, at least 6 months, and I'd had certain episodes. I was usually working evening shift and stuff, swings or graves, and I'd have these episodes in the middle of the night going to some simple 415 call, and I'm bawling in my unit. I can't go to this next call because I'm next. And I figured I was going to die. That was it was hypervigilance on steroids at its best. And I know a lot of it stems from when my partner Jordan was killed at work. And I think that surfaced 2 years later, 3 years later, because I didn't deal with it then. And all these things started to accumulate. I always call it as like you have a cup of water in your soul, and sometimes it's full, sometimes it's half, empty type of thing, or half full. And throughout life, it's constantly going up and down, up and down. Sometimes a little bit splashes out, freaks you out, whatever, right? But that's all the good and the bad stuff that's inside your soul. Mine burst, and it was full for a long time, and I think it just dumped everything into my system, and it completely messed up my nerve system, I guess. So I got to a point where I couldn't talk to anybody at work about it, because what are they going to say? You go see somebody, give me your gun, give me your badge kind of thing. We've seen it happen to other guys. Unfortunately, my agency was not very supportive of these things because I don't think that they know about PTSD. I think they're too afraid to talk about it because of what kind of can of worms that's going to open up. We've lost an officer to suicide in the past, and it just kind of goes, well, it is what it is. Well, no, it's not. These are important people. So my situation got worse, and then I think it was in June or January 3rd of 2017. I'm like, I can't go back to work. It was on my Monday, and I said if I'm no good to anybody if I can't control myself. And you have to know the difference of like, I'm in trouble right now,
right? But
I couldn't ask, because if you ask, you get in more trouble. So I figured my lower back for the 10 years prior to that, I had an MRI done, and my L5S1 disc is gone. It's been bone on bone for years. And I just deal with it, take a lot of ibuprofen here and there, some naproxen or something like that, wear a patch, a back brace so every once in a while. And I just dealt with it, but I figured I need to get away from work for a little bit so I can figure out what's going on up here. Because this can be fixed. I know that can be fused together, but this needs to get fixed. So
the back actually probably has a greater likelihood of you losing your ability to be a cop.
Yes.
I don't want to say not treating the mental part of it.
No, I agree with you. Actually, that was the thing that got me retired. So I told the sergeant, and I was on duty, I'm like, hey, my back's been jacked up. I need to go see somebody. He's like, all right, go to the clinic, this, that, and the other. I go to the clinic, and they say, okay, you're back to work in 3 days. I go, I don't think you understand. This is not going to happen. I know, but I couldn't tell them the other purpose behind it. And so I contacted an attorney, and they said, no, you can be on IOD for, until you get this thing fixed. First, we got to get an MRI, get you some treatment, get you some pills. And I'm like, I don't want pills. I'm not into painkillers like that. So that all transpired. And as this was happening, you start to feel the separation from your brothers and sisters in the department. And you start to feel like you're an outcast. And that doesn't work. And I think it made things somewhat worse. Then I started feeling alienated. The department never assigned a liaison to contact me to see how I was doing. The chief may have called me, and don't forget, this took 2.5 years to finish up. And I think he called me maybe 2 or 3 times, and that was it over that time. Never assigned someone, hey, check on Terrence, what's going on, this and that. So as this got worse, PTSD started kicking in, and I couldn't see, well, you're suing the city because of your back, because it's workers' comp, so therefore everything's up. They could subpoena whatever they want. I wanted to go see counseling, but not their counselor, because I know the ones we used to use in the past, the chief would always know what you talked about. Like, how is this confidential? I want to get this straight, but I want to go through my people. So at the time,
and this is all 2017.
2017, yeah. And I was, I've always had a Christian faith, but I started really pushing into it more, asking, what's going on? Like, why is this happening to me? Because I never had a problem. I was the first guy through every door. I got involved in I was considered a shit magnet at work. Saw a lot of stuff, did a lot of stuff. I'm very proud of, my job there, but it does take a lot out of you in that aspect. So we went to church, trying to find God a little closer, what have you and stuff. And I want to say 3 months into this thing, so like around March or so, I started to become suicidal. And it wasn't, people always think suicide, you're selfish because, you want to hurt yourself. It has zero to do with wanting to hurt yourself. Zero. You want the pain to stop. That pain of PTSD and all that stuff, like I said, that stuff flooding into your soul is too much. It's too much for anyone to bear. And I'm kind of, it's sad because I wish I had known this when I became a cop, because I think I would have understood these people who want to commit suicide a little better. Or when they're freaking out, running down the street half naked, I can go, okay, I understand what you're, and treat them a little better, because now I understand what that's like. You just want the pain to stop. That's it. You're not being selfish about it. I mean, sure, you're leaving everyone behind, but when you feel like that's your only recourse, that's not a good place to be. It's a very dangerous place to be. So I started reaching deeper into the church, and then I actually went to see a counselor through the church that was licensed. They had their own business, but they did stuff for the church and stuff. So I paid him under the table 10 months, every week to every 2 weeks, $150. I paid him cash. There was no paper trail. He understood it. He goes, as long as you don't say anything, they can't pull any records on this thing, the HIPAA, all this other stuff. And it took me 10 months to get my noodle straight.
And for those listening who have not been in law enforcement, 2017 may seem like, it was just yesterday. And it 5 years ago, almost 6 years ago now. But from the mental health aspect, it's almost a lifetime.
It is a lifetime.
Because it's getting better today. It definitely is improving. But what was normal 5 years ago is light and day compared to what it is today.
Yep. And I'm not afraid to talk about it. I was at first. Obviously, you can't, until the city finally retired me. And I'm more open about it now because there are other people, there's other guys, cops, male and female, that are experiencing the same type of things, but they don't say anything. Excuse me. And if they had the chance to be able to sit down and talk to somebody in the same field and tell them, hey, I understand what you're going through. Let me get you through this. Excuse me. That's a lifesaver. It just is. I had a friend of mine, Jim McDonough, one of our retired sergeants, and he knew early on what I was going through. And I had told him, I said, hey, I'm scared. Like, I think I might eat my gun kind of thing. And he's like, nope, we're going to work through this thing. That guy called me almost every single day or every other day, and he constantly checking in. And he knew I was always honest with him. When he knew there's days I was really bad and he'd come out and see me, we talk about it, but he did that for at least 2 years straight. And I'm in debt to him,
Now, obviously, an entire career, whatever length of a career is, we see so much in law enforcement that we're forced to bury it.
Yeah.
And I've heard a great analogy. The gentleman's name is Travis Howes. He's a former Marine and actually former police officer. And he talks about how, military veterans, when they come home, they really don't have that visual representation or that daily reminder. But law enforcement, first responders, we're still driving through the same intersections every day of our life, and we don't have the ability to let it out.
Yeah.
We constantly have to keep repressing it.
Yeah.
And so that's what just builds. But you mentioned earlier that you had your panic attack in 2017, but you believe it was undealt with issues from your partner dying. How many years had gone by?
Jordan was killed in 2014, September 30th of 2014. And I was with him when he passed, and we were eating lunch on the trunk of my car. It was actually Employee Appreciation Day at City Hall. We're eating a habit, and he was screwing with me with some other. He's a younger kid. His dad was a captain of us, Mark Corder. And we're talking. He was in the process of getting divorced, so we're consoling each other kind of thing. And I got some cheesy call, and I'm like, get off my unit, dude. I got to go to this call. So he throws all his trash in the backseat of my car as usual, right? And I leave to this call, and he's on a motor. So
for those listening, that throwing trash in the back seat of your partner's car is a normal thing.
It's a normal thing. Everyone does this. If that is the only thing that happens, you're in luck. So he just graduated, I think, 4 weeks prior from motor school. It was his first day with his brand new boots that go up to his knees. So we're all trying to step on him, dirty him up and stuff like that. And anyway, so I kick him off the trunk of my car. I got to go handle this call real quick, and I leave. And 30 seconds go by. and they canceled my call. So I'm northbound Citrus, and he was southbound Citrus. He ended up chasing after some other motor. And that's when the crash occurred. He hit a lady who was making a left in front of him doing 80. So they were putting out, there was a motor down. We didn't know, but they kept calling Mary 1, which was a call sign and nothing. I'm like, oh. So sure as shit, I'm the first one there, and he was down. It was a horrible thing to see because I can see the impact itself was really bad. I don't think I've seen impact with a motor that bad in the 21 years as a cop. But we got to him, and he, I think he died on impact. But of course, you're working on him type of thing. And we flipped him over. Put it this way, the impact was so great, his boots came off, both of them. So, and his badge actually came unclasped and was down the street. It wasn't torn off or anything. It's just that impact people talk about, how it knocks you out of your shoes sometimes. These are boots up to your knees. And I knew at that point this was dire. So we flipped him over, and we started doing CPR right away. And I worked on him for at least 15 minutes. And fire, of course, is the one time they take forever to get there, and their station's only 2 blocks around the corner. But the thing that haunts me, well, it's 2 things really, is one, he was staring at me the whole time, and I can't get that out of my head. I can't. And the one thing I can hope for is that he knows that I was there. He didn't die alone. He was with a brother, and I was taking care of him the best I could. The other thing that I still have a hard time with, and I think this is why I had all those issues, how could I have not just sat with him for 10, 15 more seconds, BSing about his divorce or doing that? That motor that was flying down Citrus, he would never have saw it. He'd be cruising around doing wheelies right now on his bike, still alive doing his thing. And I know you can't sit there and say, you hold yourself responsible for it, but you still do, because you know how law enforcement is. If your partner gets hurt because of something that you have taken part in, you're going to be like, oh, man, I was part of that. And I think that took a long time to grow and develop into this part of the PTSD.
Well, 3 years is a long time to sit on that.
Yeah. I did drink a lot during that time too. Unfortunately, that was my coping mechanism, which is you'll never find on the bottom of a bottle. I guarantee it. You can go there, and it's not going to end up there.
And so, leaning back to what you were talking about earlier, I'm assuming you were not afforded some sort of psychological counseling
They did. They offered it, but it's the same counseling team, and they can't be trusted, unfortunately, because again, in the past, the last chief, would always know about what you had talked about. So how is that confidential? If you really want me to get help, that's the way you do it. Let me talk to someone who I can really truly talk to. And everyone knew that. You just couldn't talk to the counseling team, unfortunately. I'm sure they do good work. I'm not here to badmouth them, but maybe that particular chief at the time, he had some pull. He was always a hands-on, wanting to know everything kind of guy. And I think that's how that transpired. But as time went on, I just, did my duty until it finally came crashing down, and it took a toll.
Well, and I would say even more important of encouraging people to get help, regardless if it's true or not, regardless if the chief actually knew what you were talking about, that was the perception that you had, that your other partners had. And so if that's the perception, that needs to be changed.
Absolutely.
Because you're never going to go seek help if you don't feel that it's confidential.
Absolutely.
Whether it's the chief or administration demanding to know what's being talked about, or the psychologist is giving more information than what they should. That's the whole stigma of why cops don't go ask for help. And that's what we're slowly seeing changing, but we need to definitely change more.
I think there's a part of it, too, is a machismo. It's kind of like, I'm this hardened guy. I can handle anything. I'm living proof that that's not the case. Like I said, I was a pretty hard cop. I did my job. I did it, diligently. And I wasn't afraid. I was a fearless cop. I went out, tackled everything. And it took from that to crumbling to a grown man crying in the black and white at 11:30 at night, going to some cheesy party call, thinking that you're next. It can't. That's how does that happen?
Well, and to think that you can deal with it yourself. It's almost like if you're saying, hey, I'm going to go learn how to box, and I'm going to spend every day of the week, and I'm going to be in the ring, and I'm going to spar with my coach, but I'm never actually going to put the gloves up against somebody else who's boxing me and then be able to say, oh, I'm good at boxing.
Yeah.
You don't know. The same way between your ears, you need somebody professional who knows how to help you.
Yeah. For me, and again, I know there's counseling help out there. Again, I have a Christian faith. I wanted mine to be a balance of both. And I'll explain the reason why. In March, maybe April of 2017, I'm about 4 months into this thing. I kept pushing in the church, asking, and I kept, praying to God, like, why is this happening to me? Because I'm not at work anymore, but I'm having the way it was described, the PTSD that I have, it's an adrenaline dump. There's either fight or flight. So a lot of people, their PTSD is fight, and they're very violent. They start breaking stuff, what have you. Mine is I run now. Before I used to run to all the danger. Now I run away from it, kind of thing. And this adrenaline will literally just come out of nowhere. And it's this huge dump of inflow of adrenaline in your system, and your body just can't take it. And you'll feel shaky in your bones. You think everyone's out to get you, and you think nothing around you is safe. Nothing. So when I used to see people run down the street doing whatever, you're grabbing a hold of them, and you can't touch me. I get it now. Bro, I get it. I understand that now. And I probably wouldn't have been as heavy-handed back then if I just knew maybe, hey, I've been down this road. I get this part of it, kind of thing. But I got a phone call from growing up with my buddy, 3 years old. He's a customs agent up in Oregon. He's dealing with all that stuff in Portland right now. It's just a disaster. His mom, she's got to be 78 now, I think, give or take. Haven't talked to her in years, right? And in the middle of the night, one night, I was on a very bad point in my life, and I was another night of considering, pondering that thought of what to do. And she sends me this text message, and she says, the Lord told me to give you this verse. It was Jeremiah 29:11. And I'm like, what the heck? It's like literally late at night. And what is she doing up so late, being her age or what have you? And I haven't talked to her in 3 years. So
at that point.
And I'm like, I put my gun down, just look up Jeremiah. It says, for I have plans for you, not to harm you, plans for a future for you. So I'm a bomb of every bag. That changed my life because all my answers were with him, right? Or God or Lord, and within yourself. But there needs to be some kind of a connection between the two in order for all this to start getting healing. And that's when I had started the counseling through the church and stuff. And you're in the right place when you're telling the therapist about the story I just told you, and on his business card has the same scripture on it. It's like, okay, I know where I'm supposed to be. I'm a believer in a higher power, or God that can do these things. And people say, well, that's just a coincidence. I've been asking for the longest time what my purpose is here, and why is all these things happening to me out of the blue? Like, how did this transpire? And he gave it to me in a text message from a lady I haven't talked to in 3 years. Sorry, to me, that's a miracle. It simply is. You can't make this stuff up. You just can't.
At the end of the day, whether somebody wants to explain it as coincidence or you want to explain it as faith, it's what we each take from it.
Yeah.
That's all that's important. At the end of the day, your relationship with the higher power, the Lord God, that's between you and him, her. And so if it works for you, that's what's important.
Yeah. No, he's God saved my life without a doubt. So, and I made it a point that, I'll serve him from here on out and do the best I can. I'm not perfect by any means. I'm very far from it, but he gave me a second chance.
So now you had to battle with your city to get medically retired for your back.
Correct.
Ultimately, would it have ever been able to get to a point where you could have, this is a two-part question. You were dealing with the mental health issue privately.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming you're probably still seeking ongoing help? Maybe not as frequently?
Not so much now, because PTSD can be overcome. It can. And I tell anyone who says that it can't, it's lying to you, because it can be. Because that was my doubt. Now, instead of just trying to stay alive on the job, It's now just trying to stay alive, period. And there's ways to do it. There's exercise, healthy eating. Church for me was a big thing, and finding my purpose in life. But also for me, it was doing something for other cops. If I can't serve the community I'm working in anymore, well, I'd rather serve cops then if I can, because they're all my brothers and sisters. I've always felt that way. I bleed blue, through and through kind of thing. And what better way to do it over a cup of coffee?
Right. So when you say you can, do you ever, well, maybe not necessarily ever get through PTSD, but you get to a point where you're dealing with it or coping with it or managing it. Did that come before you finalized your medical retirement?
Yes.
So if your back could have been repaired, could you or did you want to go back to work?
At that point, I was gone so long, no. But I had some other medical issues, and I think this is where, to kind of go back to that incident on that call when I had that rush that came through. So I had went to my doctor because I felt my blood pressure was high. I'm like, I probably should go get that checked or whatever. So I go in there, and the nurse hooks me up to all the electrodes, and she does an EKG on me. And then she's on the phone at 911. I have a patient that's about to have a heart attack, and I listen to her. I'm like, there's nobody else in here. It must be talking about me.
Not the phone call you want to hear when you're in the hospital.
Yeah. And I'm like, come on, lady, what's going on here? She's like, just be patient, just relax. And she's like, she's going back and forth to this 911 operator. He's breathing. He's a little flush. His EKG is all over the map. And I'm like, okay, it's me. I'm the only one hooked up to the EKG here at this point. And then
this isn't helping me calm down.
No. And then the PTSD kicks in again. So I'm ripping leads off and what have you. And now I'm freaking out. The room is tiny and it's starting to come back into me. And I'm like, I need to step outside and get some fresh air. I know what the things that I need to bring my level down. And she goes, you can't leave. I'll call the police. And I'm like, what? This is a medical. I'll just AMA out if I have to, So I go outside and I give her my keys. I go, I'm not leaving. I'll let fire check me out because I don't want to die. But at the same time, I need my space. I need to just give me some room. I'm a responsible person. I'll figure this thing out. And so she was cool about it finally. So fire rolls up and the guy hooks me up. I told the fire guy, I'm like, hey, bro, I'm a cop. Just do me a favor. Give it to me straight. Don't sugarcoat this thing. He goes, brother, I got you. And I'm like, okay. And I love fire guys. I think you never know when they're going to be peeling you off the street somewhere. So always be nice to them. He goes, how many cans of Red Bull did you have? I go, 0. I haven't had coffee this morning yet. I came here for high blood pressure. He goes, your heart is all over the place. He goes, you're not going to die though. I'm like, okay, that's cool. That's all I want to know. He goes, well, I go, I'd rather just transport myself to the hospital. He goes, well, we'd like to take you if you want. I go, I'll make you a deal. I'll let you take me, but I'm sitting in the back of the rig. Don't strap me down. I go, because I got some other issues going on here and I'm willing to go on the program, but if you tie me down, this is going to turn into a bad situation. And he's like, not a problem. So I get to the hospital and they ran a bunch of tests, blood tests and stuff. And they came back. There was I don't know how they can test this with blood with your heart, but they said I had an injury and they said it didn't happen today. So I had told them about that incident and they think that it was potentially a heart attack, that first incident that I had, because my left atrium was massive. It was blown out compared to all the ventricles and the other atrium. And they said, you're going to have a stroke. You're going to
stroke. How much time passed are we talking between what you thought was a panic attack and this incident?
Oh, probably maybe a year, less than a year, maybe 9 months, give or take, something like that.
But this was the first incident that you had since that?
No, I had other incidents between it, but they related the EKG. Well, the EKG got me into the hospital. And then they take a look at my heart and they said, dude, your atrium is massive. They said, it'll blow up, any second. And you're just going to stroke out and die. I'm like, well, that's great. So they pumped me full of a bunch of, whatever it was. I think they pumped me with Haldol and some Ativan.
Just to bring you down.
Bring me down. And then they said, you need to go see a cardiologist because you're going to die. And I'm like, great. This is lovely. So at that point, I figured I could go back with my back. I'll be in a lot of pain. My head was getting better to some degree, but I knew it was never going to be fully there. And being reintroduced to things, I don't think it'd be fair for the department. I don't think it'd be fair for the community. I don't think it'd be fair for me to, to continue on doing that. So I had to make a decision, and I figured I chose life, And then I told my attorney, I said, hey, there's throw the heart in there too, because this is obviously it's related to or whatever. And it took 2.5 years for the city to finally, give me the thumbs up. And a year and a half of it, I'm not getting paid.
But being able to come to that realization where it's not worth, and I don't want to call it a fight, but to get back to being able to go back to work is a hard decision to say, nope, I'm ready to walk away now. I'm ready to give up this fight. Just get me to the point, dealing with the city so I can walk away.
It is. I remember an old sergeant of mine told me once, he says, know when your shelf life has expired. And that always rang in my head. And I figured 21 years, it's long enough. I can deal with that. It's a good long career. I served honorably. I did what I could and stuff. And, there's a different purpose for me in life. And, I think a lot of it's this. I love helping out, other cops, other fundraisers. I'm not sure if we talked about it before, but the fundraising we do, we give out probably about $1,000 worth of coffee every single month. And it's to other agencies all across the United States that do fundraising for their own cause, whether it's to hire a new dog, get vests for their officers, or an officer has cancer or something along those lines. The last one we just did for Concerns of Police Survivors, which I'm sure you've heard of them. We gave out coffee, and it was at a golf tournament. We raised $17,000 for their organization. I've done my part, and that makes me feel good because they're a great organization. What Concerns of Police Survivors do, it's amazing. So there's survivors of blue suicide. I'm trying to get into different pockets of things that I've experienced where I can now start helping out. Everyone loves coffee,
right?
I figure I'm not here to make a ton of money on it, but the business is thriving. It's great, but I like when you get these letters from Concerns of Police. Hey, dude, I made $17,000. I'm like, where else can you do that? So it makes me happy, and that's my purpose now of still being in the game, just in a different level.
So you said making your transition away. When did you start thinking, or when was it in your head that, all right, I'm done. Now let me start looking at my next path? And was coffee the first thing you came across, or?
No, it was actually the DA's office. I wanted to go to the San Bernardino DA, was my goal when I hit 50. But I wasn't there at that point just yet. And I knew if I took a medical, that's not going to happen. They say you can still try, you can fight CalPERS with it. I'm like, I don't think I want to do that. Being a street cop was definitely done for me. Investigations, I probably could still handle something like that. But I figured I just hang it up at this point. And coffee came, in 2018 when I watched that video on Fox News. And I just figured, I always want to be my own business owner, but I don't want to do something that's just for me, being that selfish kind of entrepreneur type of thing. I want to do something where I can actually give back. So I started this.
So not to be silly. So the idea of going into coffee came organically. It just happened. It wasn't something you were seeking out.
No, it was not just an idea on Fox News and Googling cop coffee. There wasn't much there. Some guy in Seattle was throwing stickers on some bags and it looked all, cheesy. And I'm like, I could do a better job than that. Come on, this is not that hard. Oh God, it's hard. It's hard owning your own business, but I will say it's a great learning experience.
So for somebody looking to potentially open a coffee company, you talked about you started out with a small roaster. Mm-hmm. You're going to be quickly overwhelmed if you're trying to produce in bulk.
Yeah.
So you now have a 10-pound roaster.
Yeah.
Is there what's your end goal? What's the Cadillac of?
They're building the same company, Coffee Crafters, allegedly, they're building a 50-pound fluid airbed roaster. So hopefully, down the road, we'll see. Right now, I'm comfortable with this because I could roast for a couple hours in one day and have a couple 100 pounds easy.
How much space does a 10-pound roaster take up?
It's not that big. It's about the size of the table there like 7 feet long, maybe 4.5, 5 feet tall. It's not real big.
So now, starting your own business, you talk about designing a website. What other, if you could go back and be in your same shoes back in 2018, what mistakes did you make that you would kind of give yourself advice? Hey, don't do this again.
Don't give your neighbors burnt coffee because they'll hate you forever. I don't know. You know what? The only advice I think I could really give is just do it. I didn't have anyone standing by my side to say, hey, this is how you do this. This is how you do it. Everything has been done, by myself, trial and error. First off, roasting the coffee, burning the hell out of everything. Everything tasted like crap, and then I started Googling started getting on some Facebook sites on people that actually roast coffee and talk them. Some shared their recipes because everything is a recipe basically, like barbecuing. You add a little bit of this, a little bit of this, and then you cup it, you see if it tastes good, and you give it out to all your friends. They're like, dude, this stuff is bomb. Boom, you have it. So you record exactly what percentage of beans, the temperature, depending on if it's a medium, light, or dark roast. There's all kinds of factors that go into it, but there's an application on an iPad that you can do, and it tracks every roast you have on it. So if you do the same ones, they're consistent every time. And that's hard to do because sometimes
what's the app that you use?
This Thermos something. It's from a company called Rain Frog. There's only 2 of them. One was really expensive. I looked at it. I didn't like it. It was too complicated. This thing here is really easy. It's just temperature and time. And it's a graph, and you can follow the same pattern every single time. This way you make the flavors. They're exactly the same every time. Now, getting the same beans is a problem sometimes because you're ordering it from different countries. And I go through a third party right now, and sometimes they run out, or there was a big freeze in Brazil not too long ago. The beans I was getting, gone. And I'm like, well, how do I sustain the same flavor? So I had to go through a different company that had similar, there's different variations. So I got it back to as close as you can, but it's not.
Did you end up having to eat the loss when you buy those beans and they're not?
No, I'll roast them still, and I'll give them away. I'll be honest with you. If you small batch or craft coffee, they call it, you can roast almost any coffee, and if it's fresh, day and night difference. You buy the stuff that's in the stores, there's additives to it, preservatives. Maybe throw nitrogen in it, lasts a little longer, but it's still a food group. It's going to taste like crap after a while. So all my beans, you order it, I roast it, I ship it to you. It's as fresh as it gets, unless you let it sit in your cupboard for a couple months. So in all honesty, true fresh coffee is day and night difference. You won't have much acidity or bitterness to it because it's fresh, but coffee sits there longer. It starts to develop foul flavors.
So when somebody buys a bag of coffee, whoever would buy it from, what's the longest you want to sit on it for?
I suggest month, 2 months tops. So I have a lot of subscribers that they pay for a subscription for a certain amount of coffee every month. And I always tell them, hey, don't, if it's going to sit on your shelf too long, don't. We'll kick up the frequency to every 2 weeks instead of every month. This way, if you're really truly a coffee snob and you want it to taste the same every time, then I would suggest that.
Now, as far as getting into the distribution angle, what advice can you give to somebody? Are you doing it all through your website?
Yep. I have not done anything retail yet, which I'm going to get into eventually, but I'm in the process of moving to Tennessee. So that state, I think what I'd like to do is I'm actually going to open up some type of a coffee shop out there because they're very patriotic. I mean, Tennessee, every other house has an American flag on it, and all the other ones have a Trump flag still. It's crazy. So they're very pro law enforcement. So I figure I'd like to open up some type of a coffee shop out there and still do, what I do and get in the retail. But since I'm in transition between here and there, there's no sense in me getting the whole pop up, the thing and go to different, canine venues and what have you, and start selling it. I think it'd just be kind of a waste of my time at this point.
So I would imagine that it's forced you to stay on a smaller production scale so that you don't have a lot of finished product just kind of sitting.
Well, the way it works is, again, you order it. I get the order that morning, and I'll roast it. I'll sit on it for about 2 days because the beans have to degas, and then I'll ship it to you. Now, if it's whole bean, which I always suggest if you'll get a grinder, coffee is always fresher when you grind it from whole bean. I can ship it right away because by the time it gets there, it's already degassed. So that's kind of how that works. And
grinding it yourself, how do you know what to grind its fineness or coarseness?
Everyone's different. Depends, like we talked earlier about the pour-overs, the French presses, the AeroPress. If you got a Keurig, it just depends. The finer the grind, you get more of a taste depending on what you put it in. The coarse depends if you soak it longer in a French press. Again, you can play with it. You can Google it, and there's so many different techniques that people do. And then you'll find exactly what they like the best, and they'll stick with that.
Now, being that this is a food group and a consumable product, does the FDA get involved in your?
No, they don't, because it's considered a cottage food or cottage law. There's not that kind of handling that they expect.
Do you have to stay below a certain production level for that?
No, not at all. So everything's done in a clean, environment kind of thing. I wear gloves, the whole 9 yards of stuff. But there's really coffee. I think that's why so many people sell coffee, because it's easy to get into. It's not really regulated like other people are. I mean, if you can sell tacos on a truck on the corner of a street, I think think the coffee will be okay.
Now, going the different angle, you set up your business, you're selling your coffee, but now you want to start doing the donation or the fundraising, setting up the whole aspect to that part of your business. What advice can you give to somebody?
Well, we've been doing that since day one. That was my goal, is doing fundraisers for cops that have been injured. We started off actually fallen officers for their families and stuff. And I'll be honest with you, no one really wanted to do it, because most agencies, if he or she was killed in line of duty, the department, there's a lot of money that comes into the family and stuff. So people are like, well, why would I want to buy coffee and 50% this and that? So it didn't really work out the way I originally thought. But the wounded cops that are injured, maybe been fired or what have you, and they're looking for legal money, all these different things, it's a hit in that sense. But I don't always do all of the advertising, because we don't want to be known as 100% fundraising. We want to be known as a coffee company, but this is the other portion of our company. We want to help out as much as humanly possible. So we'll contact a lot of people, or we get a lot of people contacting us saying, hey, we're doing a fundraiser for this. What can you do for us? We'll always usually do 50% of where the net sales are, but we let them advertise. So they'll do it on their social media saying, hey, we're doing a fundraiser because we need a new canine and we're looking to raise $15,000. Blue Line Roasting, they're going to donate 50% of all net proceeds. Use this code for the next 3 days on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and it's a done deal. But they do most of the work for you in reaching out saying, hey, come on here, help us with this. Because if I keep doing that on my website, then I look like I'm just a 501c, which I'm not. So I don't want to end up being a nonprofit.
So that was what I was getting at. You haven't gone down the legal paperwork route of formulating a nonprofit organization.
Yeah, I don't want to. That will not happen with my company. That will not happen.
You can still do the donation to a given cause, and you just, for no other term, document it on your business expenses that you donated.
Just don't tell my CPA. God, she hates me. She's like, you keep handing out checks to these guys. She goes, can you get maybe like a guy has a 501 or something? I'm like, yeah. So there's a couple. I can't give up all my secrets, but right. I have a few friends along the way that I've met, and they have 501c. So I'll donate the money to them, and then they cut the check to the family. And this way we can avoid it all. Because if not, I eat the taxes on it, and it hurts. It hurts a lot. So I figured that out the first year. I'm like, that was a lot.
Now, how much time do you have to devote to the shipping and packaging process, or is that all handled third party?
I do it all.
So you're going to or does an Amazon truck just basically back up to your driveway every day?
No. I have a shop where I roast out of, and then I do all my own packing because I have my system of what I do. Usually I'll just take it to the post office. Take it to the post office myself, or the UPS office, depending on what's being shipped. But now I'm a one-man show.
Now, finding a supplier for your beans, is that a process or pretty easy?
It's easy. It's just the prices are different, and the prices are going up, as we speak right now. Unfortunately, everything's going up, and I don't want to hand that down to the consumer. Everything's free shipping. I eat the shipping, and shipping is ridiculous. Just to ship one bag of coffee in the United States, between $5 and $5.80, depending. And the more bags, it starts to come down just a little bit, but a lot of people just buy one bag because they want to try it. Profits aren't, super high, but we're dealing with a decent amount of volume on a daily basis, so it's a good thing. But we have, like I said, we're doing wholesale on that end of it. So we sell people they're putting it in their own bags, rebranding, I guess if you're going to put it that way. And we give out a lot for fundraisers. Now,
did the whole roasting for somebody else so that they can rebrand, did that come, or I keep using the term organically, or did you seek out people looking for somebody to roast for them?
I didn't seek out at first. People started coming to me, believe it or not, because word like, hey, this guy's roasting. It's not the easiest thing to do. It's a little complicated, but like anything, if you're not working, you get all day long to do this stuff. And, my pension is pretty decent where I can afford, I'm buying beans left and right, and I'm roasting them and killing them. But now I can fine tune it. Now I can buy a certain bean from a different country and go, exactly, this is how I'm going to roast it. And usually now it turns out pretty good.
And how many pounds do you buy at a time?
A couple hundred easy. So I have the UPS truck drive, and he's always carting, he sings out. I give him a free bag of coffee just because it's a hustle.
That poor guy. He's like, he sees your address, like, damn it.
No, he loves me because he gets free coffee. So I'm giving out free coffee left and right. So
that's not a good business model. I'm sure your CPA has probably got a problem with that.
Yeah, but that's that part of it, at least the fundraising. Like I said, we give out probably about $1,000 worth of coffee a month, give or take. And I'm getting so many requests for different organizations. Like I just got one from California Narcotic. It's not CNOA, it's CNEA or something. And they've been around since like 89, they said, and they want to get, some coffee for their fundraiser and stuff. And I have a list of people, and the list gets too big each month. And I got to tell people, got to hit me up another month. Be first in line at the beginning of the month and I'll get you in. If not, I can't, because if not, I'm just dishing out coffee left and right, and I'll go broke doing that.
Right.
So I do have a limit to it, and there's some people I've had to turn away, and I feel bad. I'm like, hey, just on the same email thread, email me next month or the month after, or if you got an event 6 months out, jam me earlier on so I can get this stuff to you, and I'll get you, put you on that list. And then all I ask is just show me what what you did so that I know that this is actually working. I've had a few agencies that they dropped the ball. They didn't take pictures. They didn't recontact me back and stuff. So I usually put them on a little black book and negative next time because, I need a little bit of publicity, but I also need to know how much, if this is working. Because if it is, if you guys are raising a lot of money, like Concerns of Police Survivors, $17,000. That's my number one person right now. I need to know this because I know it's working, because I want to work more with them.
But I would imagine also too, for you as a business, if you've got a quality entity that you're working with, you're willing to grow, so to speak, with them because you're still getting residual advertising for your company.
Yeah. We're involved in 2 movies right now too. I met Jonathan Hickory.
Like product placement?
Yeah, actually, he did a movie called Breaking Every Chain. It's actually coming out in all theaters here pretty soon. He won all kinds of awards. His story is he got involved in alcoholism, attempted suicide, had some affairs behind his wife's back and stuff, and then he found God. And he wrote a book about it. Book went viral. It did really good. And then he made a movie on it. Dean Cain's in it and stuff. And so I pumped money into his movie, and I give him a bunch of free coffee all the time. And we're going to be in the credits. There's some product placement in there too. Lindsay Melchior, she used to be, I think it was The Bold and the Beautiful for like 20 years. She's married to an Anaheim copper. She has a docuseries called Monochrome, and it is so professional. It's an incredible docuseries on how the public views law enforcement and how there's always this misperception, but how do we change that? And there's not a lot of movies out there. It's always about, it's what this person saw and the cops views this, and it's always, there's always some kind of misconception of everything. Hers is going to be different. I think you're going to like it. She's done some product placement in there as well. Not that we became friends. She's a super nice lady, very professional. She's been on Fox News a grip of times. So her docuseries is going to be coming out. She wants to get into the different things on PTSD, why cops leave, how are you going to fix this kind of thing. But she wants the public to understand truly what it's like to be a police officer. But she also wants the police officer to know what it's like
to be the public.
Exactly, because I don't think it's always a one-way street. It needs to be both ways.
Right.
And I think that's what her docuseries is going to be all about. And I got a preview of it. I'd love to share it with you, but I can't. Sworn to secrecy. But she is doing a bang-out job. Really, very talented woman.
Now, long-term for your company, as far as you mentioned potentially opening up your own coffee shop, but what would be long-term growth ideals?
Okay, if I can get to black rifle status, which that's my goal. I always say aim for the moon. You may land somewhere else, but my goal would be to be something like that. If I could be $100 million company like they are, could you imagine the damage that I could do for law enforcement on helping out or doing whatever? Because that's where my heart's always been. It'll always bleed blue no matter what. And the neat thing about this job too is I'm talking to cops all across the United States. You'd be surprised how different they are out there in the East Coast compared to California. I mean, there's day and night difference. I've been out to the wall twice in DC, and you go to the bar, you talk to some of these guys, you're like, wow, man, these guys are totally drinking uniform. What's going on with you? But
I believe it's either NYPD or New York Fire that they're allowed to drink 2 beers on duty.
Two. Yeah. It's crazy. But you're meeting these guys all across the United States, and you're hearing their different stories. But the one thing that is true amongst us all, is we all care about each other, and we all have that heart to want to help somebody. It's not, I don't think any cop wakes up and goes, yeah, I'm going to be a cop today. I mean, it might be a few that like to carry a gun and be all macho or whatever. But the vast majority of us wake up and go, I want to serve mankind. I want to serve people. I want to fix people's problems. And it's universal, I think. And being able to talk to people all across the United States that I've never met in person, we talk on the phone, that's rewarding. So if I can get this to be that status, God willing, I can only imagine the good things that we could do with law enforcement, whether it's PTSD, or suicide prevention, all these things. Because look at this last couple of years, how many cops have we lost to suicide? I could have been one of them. I lost one friend to it. It's like, how do you combat that? Well, this is my way of doing my part, because if you have to do a little bit at a time, you can't just jump into it. But if everyone, collectively does these things, I think we can turn this thing around. I do believe that.
Does the growth of your company mean a larger selection or just more quantity of what you have?
I got some ideas coming. I got some, yeah.
So you're like a mad scientist. You're always playing.
I have the formulas already. I want to wait, because this transition to Tennessee is really killing me right now. And actually, my daughter's going out there before me, and I got to get her out there with her son. And so I'm really busy. And again, I'm a one-man show, and I'm trying to figure these things out. But I got these blends that are coming up. This is going to blow your mind. It's going to be, the bags, actually, coffee's really good, but the bags are going to be epic. I think, and again, I mean, you look at all the names on here. I want to get names that cops, Fair Drill and Tap Rack Bang. If you look at other names besides Black Rifle, because I love their blend names, a lot of them are Third Watch, or Rookie, the Rookie blend. It's like, come on, man, get something a little, so the cops can relate to it. I always were like, Fur Missile for canines. And so people like it. And it's funny, because I should trademarked it. Fur Missile, Black Rifle now has a Fur Missile. I started the Fur Missile copy, and they copied me.
Now, as far as the coffee lines, so how do I want to ask this? Is there, you deal with a distributor to get your beans. Mm-hmm. So you have to use what the distributor has. Does a distributor give you worldwide access?
Oh, yeah.
So I know I'm kind of going backwards on this, but it's just kind of been rattling around in my head. When you start seeking out, if somebody's listening and they want to start their own coffee company, is it literally just Google coffee bean distributor and then just shot in the dark, trial and error?
Yep. Pretty much. And I went through a couple different companies, and it was really expensive. They charge you an arm and a leg for shipping. And some of the beans, believe it or not, I got one company called Fda Ridge, and they were infested with it was not a fly, not like a fruit fly. It was a bug that eats these beans. And and I'm like, what the heck? So I had to ship it back to them. I'm like, I'm not going to use this company again.
Will that cross-contaminate anything else that you have?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I have what, probably at least 1,500 pounds on hand. So at any given time. So if I got to be careful, because if not, it gets the rest of them, and all it takes is one bug and probably ruin the whole batch. But there's other companies that you can taste their beans too. The quality's not as good. You can look at a bean itself and just go, this looks like crap. This is not good. When you start to get bigger, you can actually go out there and talk to these farmers, and I can tell them, hey, this is going to be my micro lot. This is all mine right here. And here's the money ahead of time. This way you can stay consistent.
See, that's where my questions are eventually going to. So when you're dealing with a new distributor, you're a new guy and you want to start trying to make coffee. And so how much do you have to buy? What I'm getting at is, you talked about getting several hundred pounds now. Is that what you were purchasing from the get-go?
No. I was only a couple hundred pounds at a time. I was burning it, because figuring everything out, trial and error by everything. And usually you get it pretty quick, within a few days if you need it. But as I went from the smaller machine to the bigger machine, my business started to grow along with it. So I kind of kept it in check with it and just ordered as I go. But having beans on hand to roast is the number one important thing, because if you don't, then you got to shut down maybe one or two of your blends, say it's sold out for the time being, and to get those beans in. For instance, like this whole cargo issue that's going on right now, I'm screwed with a lot of stuff. So I had to go out and buy a ton of coffee because I know I'm going to only get one shipment through for right now, and that has to last me for a certain amount of time because of this whole, cargo issue over Long Beach.
Now, have you stayed with the same distributor through your?
Yeah, this one I have.
You've established a relationship with them.
Yeah.
So then the long way I was going to this is there a portion of the world as far as where beans are coming from that you haven't ventured into yet that's kind of on your bucket list?
No, because everything's really down to South America.
Oh, okay.
Or Central America. I haven't ventured too much into Africa. I did buy some Kenyan AAAs, they call them. Really hard bean to roast. I wouldn't mind getting into that eventually down the road, but most of your beans are all Central America. Just blending different ones, different percentages is really the key to it. And people, you talk to other roasters, they don't tell you their secret because it's like their own little, their homemade recipe, and what tastes good, it works. And there's some people that taste are like, this isn't for me. It's like anything else.
Do you find, are there beans that are more temperamental that maybe aren't worth your gamble to try to play with because of the cost?
I do. Actually, I have a pea berry. And a pea berry is basically, it's one seed, cherry, whatever you want to call it, inside the husk. And normally if you look at a coffee bean, there's two sides of it. One side is flat and the other side is kind of like a rounded, right? The pea berry, it looks more like an egg shape. So it's almost completely round. It's one bean or one seed inside that cherry, and they say that seed gets all the flavors and nutrients instead of it splitting it up with two. So it's a little more expensive for that bean. They're really hard to roast because you can't make that for like a light roast or whatever. It's more on the darker side, but it has a lot of chocolate flavors and it's incredible. They're just a pain in the ass to roast at times.
Now, is there a bean that is so good, so whatever, that you would never make it with as a blend? You only would use that?
Sumatra. I love the Sumatra. It's awesome.
So that's one that
it's always a standalone. You can do Sumatra in almost in any, whether light, medium, or dark, and it always tastes phenomenal. I don't know. I have no idea why. It's awesome.
So any other words of advice other than probably somebody's, I'm sure, going to reach out to you through your website if they've got questions, but any other words of advice if you're looking to start a coffee company?
Just do it. And it's like I always look at it as barbecuing. How many times do you start off barbecuing and you burn the hell out of everything? You're throwing it, give it to the dog or something like that, right? And then after a while, you start adding different sauces to it, different techniques, like a bayback, a 3-2-1 method, which you probably barbecue a lot. So these different aspects, and you get different flavors, different textures out of it. Coffee is no different, but the variations are unlimited. You can add just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, or just mix two of them together, and you'll cup it to see how it tastes. If it has the flavors that you want with the right beans, the right company, and then it all kind of blends in together. And once you figure that out, you write it all down, or you keep it on your iPad where it shows your roast, and all you got to do is copy that roast every single time.
Did you ultimately blend for what tastes good to you, or were you aiming more to what tastes good to other people?
I actually just still do it to myself. I did a lot of surveys. I sent stuff out in the past, like how many people actually put cream and sugar? And it's like 65, 70% people, they flavor their coffee. Why? Because they don't like black coffee. Because black coffee tastes like crap sometimes. It just does. It's burnt water, people say. A lot of it's because it is burnt. If you like drinking, even like what's the Starbucks one that they normally have? It's not the blonde. It's Pike's Peak. It still tastes burnt. It has a bitterness to it. It does, because that's their trademark, and people, since Starbucks is so huge, that's what people are used to. So using the hot air fluid bed roaster, it takes most of that away from it. It just does, and you'll find a much cleaner, smoother cup of coffee, whether it's a medium body or a full body, but it gets rid of all of that, and you can actually sip the cup of coffee. And you're like, hey, this stuff's pretty good black. You don't need to add nothing to it, and that was my goal. But it also means it needs to be sweet. It needs to have some chocolate tones to it. I have two that have some a little bit of tobacco flavor in it. Some people like that, believe it or not. But I found the right beans, the right origin that have that, and that's what I focused on. So that's, again, different origins have different flavors, but you have to be able to bring those notes out in roasting, and that comes in like a million different ways.
Would you say your palate was mature enough when you started to be able to get to a point where you could say, okay, yeah, this is a good tasting cup of coffee, or has that had to improve also over time?
It improved, because I was tasting stuff. I'm like, this doesn't taste right. Like, cause I'm used to Starbucks, 7-Eleven coffee. I forget the gas stations. Dunkin' Donuts. I don't know. The big craze is it tastes like crap, I think, personally. This is before I even did this. But I always liked something that tasted smooth, that didn't have a bitter taste to it. Something you can just drink it. You're like, oh, this is perfect. I can enjoy this. That had just a little bit of sweetness to it. So I figured that's my palate, and I started working around doing that because I can't get into everyone's head.
Right.
And it's like, again, it's like going to if you're an alcoholic and you go to the bar, everyone has a different flavor. Add a little more of this, throw a little more of this, and coffee's no different.
Where I was going with that is I would imagine if you're trying to wrap your head around what everybody else might like, you're probably never going to get to a flavor. So you got to go with what works for you and hope that works for the masses.
So what I've learned is from doing a lot of some studies on it and emailing people and sending out surveys kind of thing, smoothness is the number one thing. Because people have the bitterness or the acidity. I don't care how smooth the coffee is, you're still going to taste that. So smooth is the most key thing that I have focused on. And everyone's like, now I'm a black coffee drinker. I'm like, I've done my job.
So I'll bring this to the end with, so the poor guy who's working 2:00 in the morning, pushing his black and white around and wants a cup of coffee. What does he do?
Go online and just buy it.
No, I mean, how do you brew a cup of coffee in the field at 2:00 in the morning?
Go to Dispatch. Go to Dispatch. I'm sure they got a Keurig in there or something because those girls have all the gizmos, how to do it right. But if not, you can get your own AeroPress. You can do that in the station. It's pretty easy. All you need access to some hot water kind of thing. I'd love to get, and I do have coffee in a couple different stations. We're in Portland, Oregon. One of their stations up there, they buy coffee from me on the regular. There's another chief. Where is he at again?
They've got a barista working.
I know, pretty much. Silicon Valley. I forgot the name of the agency, Mountain Hill or something. He's up there by the Google area or whatever. He's like, man, your coffee is really good. So he's constantly buying bags. So I gave him a discount code. I'm like, hey, I'll hook you guys up. Make sure to take care of you and stuff. So this way I make $1 and you guys have good coffee and stuff. And they're, getting their coffees. I think he just wants them to go 10-8 and go do some enforcement or something. So I don't know.
Well, hey, I appreciate your time. Anything else you'd like to kind of wrap up with, whether it be related to coffee or related to PTSD?
The only thing, coffee is just a side thing, really. The PTSD thing is dear to me because cops. I think there's a lot of cops that do have it, but it might be at a very mild level. Could be a really bad level, like where I was at, and some they go over the edge, and we know the outcome of that one. Is seek help. That's all I can say. Just whatever you do, talk to a buddy, talk to a guy who's maybe gone through it, because it is survivable. It is. I don't care what anybody says. It's survival. Now, you're never going to shake it. It'll always be with you, more unlikely. But it's like anything else in life. You manage it. You lose a limb, you figure out a way how to get around. It's really no different than that. But it can be done. And I always suggest, again, because of my faith and stuff, I think if you bring God in the picture, He is a saving grace. He is. He saved my life. And I made sure I put that on the bottom of my bag because, In-N-Out Burger does that. They put their scripture on their stuff. And I'm not afraid to talk about those things because he saved my life, and that's what he's here to do. So, don't give up hope and talk to somebody. Call me if you have to. I'm always be available 24/7. I've over the last couple of years, I ran into a few cops. Obviously, I won't say who they are and stuff, but I had to take their gun away from them, make sure that they're okay. And I'm glad that they reached out because they're better now.
Well, you bring up a great point in that not only do agencies need to get better at encouraging their people, not even just officers, dispatchers. Every one of us deals with the stress that comes with this job.
Yeah.
Hey, go get help. But we need to do better jobs as partners to, when we see something in our partner, not to ignore it, not to be afraid to have that, because it's going to be a hard conversation.
Yep.
But you got to look them in the eye and go, hey, you don't look like you're well. What can I do to help you? Do you need some help?
Yeah. Be the brother. You have to be the brother. We are our brother's keepers. We have to think that way. But I think cops are still afraid to. But I do believe it's turning. I think it's turning. But if we don't, if we let off the gas on this, you know how that is.
Right.
We're back to square one again, and we can't do that. We can't. And that's the reason why I'm here. This is the first interview I've ever done. I've talked to friends and stuff, and I've been a little bit more outspoken about my issues and what I had and stuff. And if the city wants to come after me for X, Y, and Z, that's fine. Go for it, kind of thing. But I'm a whole man now compared to where I was. But what I went through, I don't want anybody else to go through, because it is the worst, most horrible, in the desert by yourself kind of experience. And it's not the place to be. We're supposed to be a family. We're supposed to take care of each other. We take care of all these people out in the street. We put our lives in the line for them every single day. But we need to do more for each other. And the agency needs to back us up and letting us do that. Letting us, be that liaison to that guy or girl that's going through this stuff, and not make them feel like, hey, we're going to take your badge away because you're going to go to the puzzle factory pretty soon. That's the wrong approach. They'll say nice things to you, but in the back room, it's, hey, we're going to pull this guy's badge because he's a liability. Can't be that way.
Yeah, it's not a liability. It's a medical issue that needs medical treatment.
It is. And again, like, if you look at all the cops in recent years that have committed suicide, they don't go run around the station killing everybody else in the station. They harm themselves because they're tired of feeling the way they're feeling, and they feel this is the only way out. So yeah, it's a liability in that issue, but I think they're always worried about someone going postal or whatever. Really, where have you seen that happen? It's always an individual by themselves because they're struggling and they're alone and they're in the desert. That's not the place to be. They can't be there. They need the department to let them know, bro, we got you. We're going to get you through this, and you're going to go 10-8, and you're going to handle your stuff, and we're going to be just fine. You're going to have a nice, lengthy, career. You're going to get to retirement. You're going to be where you want to go be, instead of being a basket case. It's just, it can't be that way anymore.
What's the website?
BlueLineRoasting.com. Yep.
And the ability to get contact to you through the website?
Yep. There's a contact form on the bottom there. I usually respond within a day. There's also an email in there. There's stuff on the side of my bags too, email addresses on one of the sides over here. But yeah, if there's anyone also that's listening to this podcast that's out in the field and they're struggling, email me, give me your number. I will call you personally. I don't care who you are or what your situation you're in. I'm not going to tattle. I'm not going to go contact your department and say X, Y, and Z. I'm going to help them out.
I appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking your time to listen to the podcast. I truly hope you enjoyed it. Not only is the podcast available on audio platforms, but you can also watch it on YouTube at the Transition Drill Podcast channel. Please subscribe for future episodes. The best way you can help the show is by getting the word out. If you think somebody else might enjoy it, I would appreciate it if you would share it with them. Also, if you have the time, please go to Apple Podcast and leave me a rating. I welcome your feedback, both positive and negative. You can also go to the website, transitiondrillpodcast.com, and through the contact tab, send a message directly to my email with any comments or suggestions. Thank you again, and I hope you tune in for the next one.